Hey guys, Shop Talk Podcast.
I'm a zero pro guy.
I did it, yeah. I ran a marathon.
You only crank screw?
Am I the town hero? 3 laps of that are just...
Okay. Hey guys, Shop Talk Podcast here, episode 74 with the number 74, Gabe Bunke. Gabe, we're up here in the Bunke Racing Shop. Thanks for having us up here today.
Yeah, no problem. This is cool. Thanks for coming up.
Before we get started here, shout out Woody's Traction. Use the code SHOPTALK10. Save yourself 10% off, free shipping. Gabe, your favorite Woody's product?
Ooh, the Bunke bar.
The Bunke bar?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, so we were working with the TDs on some stuff. You know, as we went more rider forward, we started, having them build us some kind of
Specialty
prototype,
bars?
prototype stuff, and they tagged one. The Bunke bar. I don't know, it was probably 10, 15 years ago now, but it was kind of fun working with them on it, and it really helped. Like, we were struggling because back in the day with the Pro X's or trailing arm machines, or even edges and stuff, we were using comp bars, and we got into this more rider forward stuff, and you throw a comp bar on some of that stuff, and the back end wanted to pass the front end, and it was super edgy. So we did some kind of mashing comp bars together with round bars, and we tried all kinds of different stuff, and one thing led to another, and before you knew it, we had our own little. It never really made it into the catalog, Ben.
Oh, really?
No.
Okay. I know Greg Cattard always claims he made a special bar too, and it's like,
Right. I know. I heard him talk about that.
We just grind ours.
And then also shout out to VS3 Suspension. Vince Van Slyke, professional suspension tech, 15 years of race winning results. Vince actually just got married yesterday.
Congratulations.
Congrats,
it was my
Vince.
anniversary.
What a loser.
Yesterday.
Oh, got the same anniversaries now.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
But Vince will get you dialed in, your dirt bike forks and shock. Find him on Facebook and Instagram, VS3 Suspension. So Gabe Bunke here, 8-time Soo I-500 winner, future Hall of Famer, Brody.
Another one. He's not in my garage this time, but we're in his garage, so it evens out.
All the Hall of Famers that we've had just come sit with us in Brody's garage. It's kind of an ongoing joke.
Kind of cool.
Well, we'll have to stop by one day.
Yeah. Do another show in the actual garage.
In the garage, yeah. So just one current event here to start it off with, Gabe. There was an auction this past week on Facebook. 1997 XCR 440, never been set up. Went to auction. The ending price was $78,000.
Yeah.
Would you have paid that?
I don't think so. There's a guy in town here that's got one of my 97s, and I sold it to him for like, I don't know, $3,000 or $3,500, back in 97. And I was trying to buy it back from him, and he said, you know what, I think, I asked him what's it worth, and he's like, I'm about $9,000. I'm like,
No.
Yeah. So ours went up for sale this week, asking $69,000.
Well, you guys paid a lot for your 97.
Yeah, out in New
Right.
Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. But yeah, that was absurd for it to go that high. If you would have known that just 27 years ago, bought like 3 of them and just put them off in the corner.
right?
Been quite the investment then.
I know. I keep thinking, like, where could more of these things be squirreled away and stashed? And think there's got to be something out of Burt's, out of Pro 5, and I'm like, nah, I've been through most of that, and everything's pretty much pillaged through there. But yeah, isn't it crazy?
Yeah.
And the reality of it is for it to go that high, there must have been 2, maybe 3 people willing to pay that,
Yeah. That's crazy.
or close to that, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep. That's unreal.
No.
What did we say when we seen that auction? You were talking. You were like, "You think it'll go over $10,000?" I was like, "Oh yeah, it'll sell for 20."
Yeah.
78.
Way off. I was thinking 10. But no, we're here in the Bunke Racing Shop. We currently have Emily Ilstrup and Harley Bunke, and Taylor's back there somewhere too watching. So we got a live studio audience here. But so to start off with, Gabe, your dad, Jerry Bunke, passed away back in 1978 up at Beaujeu. You were only a year and a half old. Did that like hinder your thought at all of like wanting to start snowmobile racing?
You'd think, right? But actually, no. I wasn't really around it since I was so young when he passed away. My mom remarried, and my stepdad Jerry Klima here, from Roseau, he was into hockey. He coached hockey. I mean, when my mom met him, he was coaching hockey in the winter, and I had 2 brothers and a sister, so I got a couple of siblings, and we were just into sports the whole time. So I was never around snowmobiles probably until about 1985 or 86. I remember he brought home an Indy Trail and thought, well, that's pretty cool, and started riding around. And it wasn't until I probably was in high school that I actually even went to a race. I think the first race I ever went to was over in Grand Forks. I went with a bunch of buddies and went to, it was, Mike Hool and Steve Hool and Guy Useldinger running. And in fact, Bender was there. I vaguely remember bits and pieces of it, but it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and I was like, oh, this is intriguing. I was still playing hockey then. And I think it was, shortly thereafter, I hung up the skates and the stick and, ended up buying my own Indy 500. And then from there an XLT, and then I, kind of got to know the guys out of Pro 5, built a XCR 600 from the ground up. And then right after high school, I started working with Bob Eastman in R&D at Polaris, and still wasn't really thinking like racing is a path that I was going to, go down or even try. There was a couple of local guys that were running, Greg Rugland and, Brett Sabern, a good friend of mine, he was running in the super sport and stuff. So we'd go to Pine Lake and, then they'd keep going. So I'd been to Pine Lake a couple of times, but it wasn't until I went to work at Polaris that I actually, with Bob Eastman, working with the guys that raced with my dad. And it kind of opened my eyes with just the fact that being around those people, I learned a whole bunch about my dad that I never knew.
Oh, sure.
Because, people were scared to talk to me about stuff. My mom didn't want to, open up too much about it. My grandparents, even my aunt and uncles and stuff like that, like they all remembered them, in a different capacity and shared different things, sports and hunting and stuff like that. And then when I was able to, work with those guys, heck, in fact, there's a trophy back here that they had up on that silver trophy from Eagle River. They had it up on top of a locker and had been there since he died. It was the one that it was from the 78 World Championship in Eagle River. And basically it came back on the truck and went up on top of the locker. He never brought it home, and that's where it stayed until I started working at Polaris,
that's cool.
17 years later. And he, it was just something that kind of fell into place. And, that was 95, 96, summer 96. The race department was, out of the back door of Polaris. So everybody that was, setting everything up, as far as like applications and the race director and all that stuff, they were right there at Polaris. So I got to know those guys, and that was the year that they were bringing in that in-house team, because we were releasing the 97 XCR, the Red Rocket that year. And, we'd been working on it for a couple of years back in R&D and stuff. So I'd, gotten to help with a few different things. And basically I threw my name into the hat. I put an app in and I was going into my second year of college, and I'm like, college racing? Yeah, I can do both. Needless to say, once they said they approved me to buy a sled. So I bought a sled, scrounged up enough money to, I think they were like $4,000 or $4,500 or something like that through the race department. So
God,
it was, at the time it was a lot of money, but it'd be nice now, right?
Mm-hmm, totally.
So we, bought a sled, went racing, went back to college, went racing for the winter, and basically after that winter, I had to take a little break from college because, you know, things weren't looking on the up and up. And I was really intrigued by, you know, by racing sleds.
So was Kyle, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, like the R&D of the 97 XCR at the Polaris 70th last year, they had all them display engines, you know, and prototype engines.
Yep.
There's a 440 Fuji with exhaust valves on it. I was curious about that thing. Like, why didn't that get approved, or like why'd they switch to the Liberty instead of just keeping the Fuji?
Well, from what I understand with, and I could be, you know, wrong, but what I remember hearing, we had to switch from Fuji, you know, and start building our own engines because we were also dabbling our toes into the mountain market.
Yeah.
And Fuji wouldn't build anything bigger than a 500 in a twin cylinder.
Yeah.
And we wanted, you know, a lighter weight package, you know, something that had, you know, big bore.
Yeah.
Cat was building, you know, 2-cylinder big bore engines, you know, and that's kind of what Polaris, I think, was kind of targeting, you know, after. And then I suppose it made sense. I mean, our Fuji 440s were pretty strong, you know, 94, 95, 96 even, but I think it just was part of the, you know, overall game plan to, you know, come up with our own, start building our own engines. It was the long play, per se. With, I'm sure they tested that Fuji, you know, a bunch in chassis, like in 95s or 96s and stuff like that, but, you know, never actually, you know, hit the production line.
So there was a 96 on that auction too, still in the crate. And I think they get 17,000 something for that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that nuts?
So would 97 been your first like I-500 then?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I was trying to look back. I couldn't find any like fan class like results or anything. Or
I never raced fan.
oh, really?
No.
Oh, okay.
I went right into liquid. In fact, my first race was Pine Lake in 96, I suppose. It would have been the December of 96 race.
Yep.
And I was, you know, I remember the semi-pro class at the time was huge. So was pro. But I remember 3 rows of 10, you know, you had to qualify and you had to be in, you know, front row was 10 guys, second row was 10 guys, and third row was 10 guys. And then there was people that probably didn't even make it.
Yeah.
But I qualified for the second row. Pretty pleased there. It was cold. I remember wearing my, you know, my fully insulated, you know, Polaris jacket, which I think, you know, I thought was normal at the time, but threw a flak jacket on and, you know, went out and raced, and I came in and there was a lot of snow in the lake that year. And, so it got rough and came in and I was just wringing wet. But I think I finished in the top 10. So, you know, I was pleased with that. It was pretty competitive. You know, Brett Sabrin was who I kind of teamed up with, you know, good buddy of mine from high school. And he had been racing for a few years through the fan, you know, started with super sports and then worked his way up into the liquid stuff and had a couple of years on liquids prior to me getting started. And then, you know, we just kind of teamed up and raced out of the back of a pickup on a 2-place trailer. So.
Yeah, because that's what I was trying to find, just results to kind of base off of. But I found I had 97, the 97 I-500.
Sure.
So you got 23rd in your first I-500. Yep. So like just even looking at that list of results there's quite a few recognizable names of just from back in the days of people that are still in the industry, people that were kind of in and out, and it's always fun to look at those old results and to see how many people have kind of came and gone.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, it was pretty influential, right? Pretty new to the game. Remember those big events like that, and can almost remember every race leading up to the I-500. And from there, it's kind of a blur, but. It was, you know, a super fun year, and I remember leaving Beaujeu, and it's still, you know, just a sea of snowmobiles up there. Everybody was parked around the track, you know, in their stages and stuff. I don't know, it was 300 and some people, I think. But we took off and, ran a loop up in Manitoba and then came down to Roseau. That was day one. day 2, made a loop around Roseau and then ended up over in Thief River, and everything was going great. Day 1, I think I was in the top 20, like 14th-ish or something like that. And then after day 2, had a little bobble, out south here in Malung. I remember hitting a road approach and get bucked off. Came down, my gas cap was missing, so I was running out of the snow looking for that. And somebody on the highway, said, it's back there on a crossing. So I ran back, got it, and then took off and made it into Thief River. But I was getting pretty beat up by that time. I remember I'd never spent that much time on a snowmobile at one time and didn't have the right gear. I had some lightweight leather gloves, and I had blisters across both hands after day 1. And it was rough, but then made it to Thief River. Everything was running pretty good. I think I was, fell back a little bit, probably around that 20th or 21st or something going into day 3. And then I was able to hold position for the most part on day 3, but that was Thief River over to like Washkish area, and then ended up coming into Bemidji. Trying to think of how we finished. Was it on the lake that year? I can't remember for sure if it was on the lake in Bemidji there, but it was got in, and we had those 97s were pretty fast, but it was a new power valve engine, so the bellow systems that actuated the valves, they weren't figured out, so there was a lot of problems with those. I remember the last day, one of my bellows was blown, so I had a low port motor on one cylinder, and so she's a bit of a dog, but I think everybody was feeling it by that point. It would have been fun to watch. Corey and Kirk, I know those guys were flying. If I remember hearing right, and that it was a fun race.
Yeah. So you just dove right into the deep end of pro class.
Well, no, I started off, Pine Lake. I raced semi-pro, and then that was not a sanctioned ISOC race.
Yep.
So went to the first ISOC race was Detroit Lakes, and it was Bubba and Robert were the kind of the race directors or whatever. They took me aside and said, "Hey, you're new to this. You have to race sport." And I'm like, "Oh, really, sport? I just raced, Pine Lake. I was in semi-pro, and I held my own, I thought."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Yeah, no, it's your first year, you gotta race sport, you gotta start in sport." I think most people would come up through the fan classes and then into sport, and then into semi-pro, and then eventually graduate into pro. But I went out, was like, okay, well, race sport, and Chris Myron was, I think, the kid that was, probably the fast sport rider at the time, and we were we didn't know each other at the time, but after the fact, we talk about it, and he's like, "God, it just sucked they put you in there." 'Cause he was used to doing well, and it was a shorter course. I didn't lap anybody, but it would have, if it would have been another 5 laps, I probably would have started lapping some of the guys. So things worked really well. My sled handled really good, and partially because I was based out of Pro 5, and that year, leading up to that year, Corey was based out of Pro 5. So
I see.
Those guys knew exactly, kind of where Corey had been for the last 2-3 years on setups and everything. So, I'd run down to, school in Fargo, and then I'd come back on Thursday night or Friday morning or something, and we'd throw everything, on the 2-place trailer, and we'd head to the racetrack, and they'd have everything ready to go. So they did my maintenance for me, which it was pretty minor. I was fairly easy on equipment, for the most part, but
fairly easy. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, you gotta give her, but so then the third race was Albertville, down in right off the interstate there on there's like twin lakes that we were racing on, and I remember talking to Robert and Bubba again, and they're like, "Well, we're gonna let you race semi-pro, but it's on a trial basis." So you did pretty good last weekend in Detroit Lakes, so we're gonna see if you can be safe out there and see how you stack up. And I remember I qualified in the front row, so took off. By the end of the first lap, I was leading. And it was Jimmy Beck Jr. was one of the guys that I was battling with. Can't remember, some of the CAT guys. Trevor John was running. I think he was running in the semi-pro class, and I know he did the next year. But so anyway, we ran the whole race, and there was lots of snow on the lake then too, and was not plowed, so basically blow the corners out with the sleds, and then you drive them down the straightaway, and it'd be slush pockets and slush or holes all over the place, sharp lips on some of the bumps and stuff, and people crashing all over, and navigated my way through that, and ended up Jimmy Beck Jr. actually got around me on the last lap because he was pushing me hard, but I took a little different line on one of those, slushy pockets, and he stayed in the consistent line that we'd been running the whole time. I don't know why. That was just me being, young and naive and dumb, kind of, just like stay to the course. But anyway, I was right on his tail then, and finished second. And that night, I remember at the awards they had a big circus tent set up with big Nipco's in there, and had a band going on, beer gardens. It was a real fun deal. And Bubba and Robert came up, and they said, "Well, trial period's over." So that was I ran a full season of semi-pro. In the I-500, there was only pro.
Yep. Yep.
So I suppose a fan class maybe was semi-pro, or was...
I can't tell. It's hard to tell on the results.
Mm-hmm.
So women, I remember, was fan, because I think Debbie and Val Schlaben were, contending. I want to say they were running fan class or fan sleds, but yeah. Then 98 was semi-pro, and then 99, I jumped right into pro in 99.
When was your first trip to the Soo?
In 99.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Oh, you did go that early. So that's another era of, it's hard to, there's not a whole lot on it until you win in 02 with Mike Gentz. But from 99, 2000, 2001, what was that like?
So 99, in fact, I got an album up here. I can prove it, but it's not online. It's in a book.
We believe you.
But went there with Chad Lofton. So Chad had raced it before. It was similar to what it is now. It's not nearly as stringent of a kind of a rookie.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Type strategy or whatever for the Soo. So you basically just had to go there with somebody who. If you were new coming in, they wouldn't let you start the race, but you could race it. And there was no rookie practice or anything like that, so I qualified just the same. And Chad had to start the race because he'd been there before with Ivan Hansen, and he'd run before. And he was an oval guy, good friend of mine also from Roseau. And then we assembled a team of crew guys, Dallas Deason and Jeff Ballard, my uncle Vern. There's a few others now. I'm just drawing a blank on names. But, it was an experience. Basically, we built a sled at Pro 5, mimicked it pretty much off of what Corey's build was, because Corey was, he was winning at that time. He and Stevie Olson were running together. I think they had 3 in a row right in that.
Yeah, 98, 99, 2000.
Yep. Yeah. So he had a rock solid package. One thing I do remember that was different though is they tried a little bit different. Was it a lower end crankshaft configuration or something on my sled? So we were running a 600 triple with triple pipes, and ours ended up losing. We ended up losing the crank anyway. About 180 or 200 miles in. So Chad started the race. He came in, I got on, and I was on it when the sled went down. So
of course,
yeah, unfortunate. And that was kind of seemed like wasn't the norm by any means, but it seemed like that was more prevalent than it is today.
Yeah.
With engine failures, we were spinning stuff pretty hard, and we were dabbling in oil injection type configurations and premix configurations, trying to figure out what was best.
To get something to last all day.
Yeah,
Running
right. We ended up
10,000 RPM.
Yeah, we ended up getting the best luck out of an oil injected system. It was a modified oil injection system. So basically, injecting oil to the spots that we'd seen fail over the years. So, but the reality was, is we were all learning. It was a relatively new package at the time. Well, there was 2 600s running at the time. There was the monoblock 600 too, like what Pierce and Cricky won with, and I remember Troy running that for the first year. Right shortly after that is when he started with the 600 big block though, the 2-cylinder, and that was where things were going. But yeah, I raced in '99 with Chad Lofton, and then in 2000 and 2001 with Mike Stazak. So Mike Stazak's partner up to that point had been Jeff Kiffmiller.
Oh, yep.
And then I don't know if Jeff kind of retired or what after that '99 season, and I kind of sidelined with Mike on a Pro 5 sled and XLT engineering. And then in 2002, when I guess hooked up with Mike as his backup driver, I think with Gensi there, I think Stazak had decided that he was gonna hang up the leathers at the time and would do more just supporting of different different entities. Corey, it wasn't until after that when I won with Gensi that we started running out of Mike's trailer. That was what we were running in when Josh came over in 05. And Mike owned the sleds. Mike and Felsky's, basically, they were the sled owners, built everything at Pro 5. And yeah, so
were you in this era, were you working at Polaris still?
Nope, I was going to school.
Okay.
So yeah, I took that year or two off, and then, Taylor was a baby. Thor and I weren't married yet, but we had, had Taylor, and she was going to school down in Moorhead, and I decided, well, I'm going to go back to school. Did 1 semester back in engineering like I was going for when I, graduated from high school, and then, just kind of realized like this isn't a long game for me. I had some, interesting thoughts about the engineering field at the time.
Oh.
So I didn't pursue that any longer. I transferred over to Minnesota and finished off in construction management. So I graduated with that degree right before Bo was born. So in 02 ish time frame. So yeah, that winter that we won the Soo, I think I was my last semester of college, and then after that, we stayed down in Fargo, or in Moorhead. We bought a house while we were going to school down there, and just stayed down there because then I got into the construction field while I was going to school. So about 2000-ish time frame, I started working underground with a buddy of mine doing lawn irrigation, residential stuff. So
because that's where I knew you spent time living in like Moorhead, Fargo area.
Yep.
But then I didn't know how that corresponded when you came back to Roseau up here. So
yeah, so about 20 years, 19 years in reality. We bought a house in '99, and I moved up here the summer of 2018. So was down there, did construction. I did ag. I pounded nails for about 6-8 years. Roof and siding, building decks, garages, whatever, and basically just did what I needed to do so I could still go racing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In fact, it worked out great, I thought, but now looking back on it, it's like, geez, started my career when I was 42, 401ks like this, and my buddies are like this, it's like, whatever. It is what it is. But at least I had fun when I was young, right?
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. That's very important, I think.
Yeah. So
that win in 02 with Mike Gentz, was that just like we're at the top? Like what was the feeling like in 02 winning your first Soo with Mike?
You know, it was pretty surreal, actually. It's like, I'm trying to think when we won. I won Shawano. My first pro race win, I think, was in 02 in Shawano, Wisconsin. And that was on a half-mile track. And I'm trying to remember how that all went down again. If it was,
like
must have been pre-Soo. Must have been like in January of
like a Myra event, or
yeah, it was. It was like a Triple Crown type event that they had. I want to say Mackinac City was one of the races, and Shawano, Wisconsin, Mackinac City, and probably Drummond Island were three races out of the Myra circuit that I think they did like a series within itself. Sure. So I was there the year before with Shane Wall and backed him up, and that track was just a short little bull ring. It was a quarter-mile track or something on a fairgrounds. Felt like we were never on the sled, but it was interesting because it was a 200 lap race. This is kind of going on a tangent here, but you're bringing up some memories.
Yeah.
But 200 lap race, and we split it. Corey was my backup driver. It was, you know what? That was maybe later. So now I'm getting my dates. Either way, we basically ran 100 laps each. I started the race, and all I had to do was stay on the lead lap. And we were super loose because we were set up for the last 100.
Sure.
So we came in, and you couldn't, like that track, you could not make it back out in front of the pace sled when you'd come in for fuel if you changed the ski. So basically we came in, put fuel in, changed drivers, and made it back out right in front of the pace sled. I think it was Scotty Masiak and I were the only two that made it out in front and didn't lose a lap.
Yeah.
During at the 100 mile at the plow mark. So Corey went out and basically maintained a lead, and we ended up winning. So that was I think after we had won with Mike at the Soo. Come to think of it, it was probably 03, 4-ish time frame. But either way, it was a pretty memorable moment. But winning the Soo with Mike was exhilarating. It was interesting though, because Mike was one of those seasoned guys that he was always, he was John Wick in it. Like he ran the whole thing himself.
Yep.
And for some reason that year he reached out to the guys at the race department, and Bill Rader was a good friend of his, and Bill was the race coordinator at the time with Tom Rager, and Bill told him to, get a hold of me or whatever, which made sense because I was up here in Roseau. And Mike had come up here for a week to, kind of rebuild the old sled that he'd been using. And I'd help him in the evenings and stuff like that. And I was testing, I believe, for the I-500 at the time. So I was working on my own stuff and then helping him. And we ended up going to the Soo and drove out there in our car and showed up and ran the race. And yeah, everything, was kind of like clockwork.
Really?
Out, yeah.
Even when I was talking to Alex Hattin yesterday, he said just hearing stories of the early Pro 5 Soo days, it's just it's a lot different than what the effort you guys put forward to now.
Sure.
Like it's just different levels of effort.
And we've learned a lot, throughout the years. And I guess, it was not until 2010 or 11 when we kind of branched off and did our own thing away from Pro 5. And I guess what cut the relationship there was when, we jumped on board and with Polaris, and they wanted to help, kind of build the program. Cause in 2010, so it was 2011 when we switched, I went to the Soo with Aaron Christensen, and I was building my own stuff pretty much at that time. Because leading up to there, I was running, some of Pro 5 stuff, and it was probably 2009. I was like, you know what, we can't compete. And that was the year Brian, I think Brian won
Yep.
on the Skidoo.
Yep.
So it was Brian, Corey, and myself running like 1, 2, 3 at a certain point there towards the end of the race. And I was on an old Dragon at the time with, with the same engine that we had. It was the same engine that we had in the 05 Pro X, that we won with, which it was a good engine, but it was just down on power.
Yep.
So we would drive wide open under the bridge and basically just to catch up to, Corey, and because Corey had a fuel injected engine at the time that he had Darren Hedlund at Polaris make, and he had some, better power than I had, but Pro 5 didn't have the ability at the time to go down that path and start over. So we just stuck with the old package, and I ended up folding the front end over twice that race, the right-hand ski, basically from coming in, to corner 1 and 3, wide open, and you'd basically just turn the handle, throw it into the bank, and, before I knew it, the spindle was rolled over and come in, and guys were reefing on it, welding, and at the end of the day, I had angle iron welded to the control arm. Try to hold it straight. But we finished. I don't remember exactly where, but I remember we've got to do something different, from an engine package. And then the following year, we were racing in cross country. We were racing IQs with the Snowcross 600 in it, and I got a brand new 2010 to race in cross country, and we also had the Rush in 2010. And I still have my 2009 IQ that I'd raced with the year before, won a couple of races with that, so that thing was all set up, ready to go. I kept that, and I used that in cross country along with the Rush. And then that brand new IQ 2010 IQ that I got, I built into a Soo sled. And I basically used my cross country package, little bit of a modification in some spots to make it go around a corner better, but it used to get rougher than it does today.
Yeah.
And we knew we needed good suspension. So, and then that was the year Josh decided not to come back. I think 2009 was his last year that he went, and it was funny. So I think he'd pretty much hung up the helmet for cross country the year before in 08.
Yeah, after Garrison.
Garrison, yeah.
Yep.
So he hadn't really ridden too much in 2009. He came to the Soo and ran a bunch of laps or whatever. And I remember we got out of the truck. It was Josh, Thora, and myself in Josh's truck pulling Pro 5 trailer back to Roseau. Josh got out somewhere, Marquette or Munising or somewhere, Ironwood. And he's like, every move it was the groan. He's like, I guess you need to ride before you go, before you go to the Soo. And so it was after that, I think he decided to pull the pin on racing. So I was looking for somebody to ride with in 2010, and Tom Rager Sr. forwarded me over to Aaron. Aaron had just started racing cross country. He came over from Snowcross in 08, so I kind of knew him and not real well. And I asked him, he had never heard anything about it, but his Uncle Kenny, he's like, shit, you got to do that. That's cool. And one of the things Aaron, excuse me, Aaron asked was, are we going to win? And I said, well, there's a real good chance, I mean, we're going to, here's the sled, here's the package. The only, question mark is, getting through the day. And, I believe in the chassis. I believe in the suspension package, everything. We got a brand new pipe package and a brand new engine package that we'd never raced with before. Because we took the 600 stroker, the Snowcross engine, and, got some SLP pipes and had, guys at Polaris tune it in a little bit. And it ran good, but it was a little bit peaky on power and tough to clutch, and went out there, missed it, burnt it down.
Just like that.
Yeah. Rebuilt it. Aaron's like, I got to get some laps out here. This is fun, So we rebuilt it in the pits, went back out, threw some fatter main jets at it, maybe lightened up a little bit, and went back out. And I mean, we were, 70 or 50 or 70 laps down or whatever it took us to rebuild the engine. And I remember at the end of the day, he was out there just burning laps, just having fun, just having a grand times. Everybody's running their Gen 2s and just pounding through the holes, coming into one, and he'd come wide open down the front stretch, and he'd burp the throttle, hit the first set of bumps, and he started doubling stuff going into corner one.
Oh, my God.
And I remember Senior standing there on the bank, and he's like, oh, man, this is fun. He hadn't been there in years. And it was right after that, he's like, guys, we gotta put a package together, because I'm the only way that this thing is going to grow is if we get people off that old iron, and it took a few years, but they went ahead and, they grabbed my sled at the end of the year, brought it back down to Wausau, tore it apart, put it back together, built up a brand new one, and we went with Rugland for an engine package. And I hadn't worked with Larry at all. Up to that point, he was a Pro 5 guy back, before I started racing. And then he and Bert split off, and he went down to Menominee there and opened up his own shop. And but he was known as an engine guy for sure, and he built us an engine package that I was pretty adamant, and I said, well, I know Larry, I know he builds good stuff. He builds horsepower, lots of horsepower, and from what I know, like a lot of his engines aren't that reliable at the Soo. Like I need something that's going to go all day long. I told Tom, I'm not going to the Soo with the new engine package unless I can run at least a barrel of fuel through it before I go to no. So they built up two sleds. They built up my old sled, which was with the 2010, put the same engine package that they had in the new sled that we were just going to go to the Soo with, right?
Yeah.
We didn't really have any test time on it or anything. And he said, all right, well, I got you an extra barrel of fuel. Why don't you go up to Roseau and get some of the guys from the shop in Roseau to help, do some, fish hook type calibrations, because they had some dyno numbers, and this was a new package for Larry too, because it was down on compression from what he'd normally run, and it wasn't nearly as powerful as some of the stuff that he'd been building for like the Bozics and stuff over the years. But you know what? It was consistent. And that was the first thing I noticed is like, God, this thing just runs. Doesn't matter what you do, what jet you put at it, what weight you put at it, it just kind of runs. And I burnt a full barrel of fuel on the back track at Polaris with my previous year's Soo sled. And it's a a little over a half mile, 2 lanes. And basically I just run wide open down, turn around, come back, wide open back for a full barrel of fuel. It took me like 3 days. And and then it was like, okay, yep, we're good. Loaded everything up, went to the Soo, Aaron and I, and we had a good solid package. We were leading with about 70 or 80 to go in 2011. Aaron was on the sled, and he hit a kicker right before the flag stand on the outside, and it upset. Basically, we bottomed out the front track shock. It upset the sled, and when the sled was airborne, it went sideways in the air. And when it came down, it was mass carnage. But we had a 3-lap lead at the time, made it back in, and made it back out. He went back on the sled because, handlebar bushings were blown out, the handlebars were bent down, hood was in rough shape, and it was 70 laps to go or something, and he was on adrenaline, so he jumped back on the sled and went back out. But we had to come in a couple of times because things were pretty bent up. Ended up, probably falling back down to 5th or 7th or something like that. I think we still finished in the top 10, and that would have been the last year Corey won, I think, in 11. If I remember right. He and
I didn't take a screenshot.
I'm pretty sure that was what the outcome, because there was some other things that went on there too with leader changes, but I think he was the one that ended up.
Yeah, he won in 11. Him and Travis.
Sneaking in there at the end. But yeah, it was a bad crash. I don't think I've ever seen Aaron crash that hard before. Even when he broke his collarbone a couple of years ago, that was just a little fluke deal. But yeah, coming into one, it was real similar to Taylor's crash last year.
Oh yeah.
As far as like speed and intensity and stuff, but Taylor was just a lot closer to the corner.
Yeah.
So he hit the bales. Where Aaron, he just slid down underneath the bridge and then got back up, flipped the sled over, came in, and went back out. But he'd flown into the Soo that year, and I remember getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning so he can catch his flight back. He had to go over to Soo, Ontario to catch his flight back to Edmonton, and get down to the lobby, and there he is sitting in his duffel bags. And he said, "You gotta carry my duffel bags. I can't lift them." And he stood up, and his arms were straight down. He said, I can't lift my arms. So, yeah, I got him to the airport, hauled his bags into the lobby. Somebody came and grabbed him, and he got on the airplane, and away he went.
Jeez.
Was that on this sled?
No, it would have been this would have been built right after that.
Okay.
That one crashed hard.
There's no saving that one.
We rebuilt it, and then the Faust ran that sled the next year.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be damned.
2012. So this was brand new in 2012 when we, raced the following year. So.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's kind of the start of it, and then from there, leading up to that point, it was, just kind of the same old program that we had for 10 years when I started racing with Feldskis and Pro 5. And, I didn't know any different. So it was what we did. And, we had our little notebook of what we were doing from year to year. And, but it wasn't until we started with Polaris and Ben Hayes and Junior, and then Ben's dad and his uncle got involved, Doug and Gene Hayes, and, that they brought it to the next level.
Yeah, they were
as far as
building those sleds like in Wausau at the race shop.
Yep. And they were building, I think when they started after the 2012 season, I think they built 5 of them after that. Yeah. And, there was 3 or 4 teams that got a sled, basically bought a sled that was built right off of what we were, had raced the year before. And then there was some, little bit newer things that we were trying with our sleds, like the Faust sled and our sled. Our sled was probably more consistent with what we ran the year before than the Faust. The Faust we used as a little bit more of a test platform.
Sure.
Like the year that we came out with the new cylinder in 2013, we stayed with the old low port cylinder for probably 3 years before we decided to actually go into that higher port. Like, it didn't show as big of a benefit as what we needed in order to continue to win. Because we were, I guess, knock on wood, fortunate enough to be, in the winner circle more than anybody else in that era. So we didn't want to upset the apple cart and didn't want to change anything.
This table is not wood, by the way. Just making sure you know that.
Yeah.
It's more of a habit.
Before the IQRs and stuff, the Fusion, that's where it's at. You raced the Fusion?
I did.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a picture of me on one back here somewhere.
So I have that written down. Dragon or the Fusion?
Actually, so the Dragon for sure, which basically IQ before it was tagged the Dragon in 07. So the 07 IQ was basically the Fusion with, a fresh engine package and different plastic.
Oh, okay.
The Fusion, though, was awesome. Like, it wasn't the 7 or 900 that we had issues with. It was the old 600 small block, and being able to drive through the rough the way we could with, an A-arm type suspension was just baffling to me. Like, I was used to the trailing arm sled, which I'd gotten so used to, and it worked.
Yeah.
But, we were able to, just take it to that next level with the A-arms, just more suspension basically. And then, the Dragon, same suspension package, same chassis, fresh plastic with the IQ, and then the fuel-injected motor in 07, which was a really good motor. So, and then Dragon in 8 and 9 was what it was tagged. And those, I guess, progressively got less appealing.
Yeah.
I mean,
We know what you mean.
Yeah.
the 2008 was a little bit worse. They made some changes to the engine so it'd run better, maybe run cleaner, whatever, but it wasn't nearly as fast. Same suspension, all that stuff. And then in 9, it was pretty much the same engine package, so not as strong as the 07 still. And then they changed up some of the configurations in the rear suspension, I know, to try to, I don't know, for assembly or something. But anyway, that was a 1-year wonder.
Yeah.
Then we went with the Rush, and I don't know, the Rush was all new, right? So you don't really know how it's going to be. You're kind of taken on by the new.
Yeah.
A little bit there, and actually had relatively good luck with it. Ended up, I think, second in the I-500 behind Ebert in 2010, primarily because all the fast cats burnt down or had something go on the last day. I think I started in 7th and ended up in 2nd. So
my dad, he was going to buy like the 09 Dragon from Josh, Josh's Dragon. And so he wanted to just try it. So my dad brought that to, Kyle's getting a beer delivery here.
Yes. Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good.
This is a great play.
Yeah, this is sweet. Who do I got to talk to get Dragon and flames on my sleds?
That's what Alex Atina said that too. He's like, no more dragons. Dragons and sleds don't mix.
I said, somebody at Polaris, I got to get a Dragon on my sled or flames. One of the two.
we got a brand new Dragon, a mountain sled, so 155 still in the crate.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
That's sweet.
Yeah. Not too many people know about it, but it showed up at work here a couple years ago. It was lost, but it was found in a warehouse out in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And they, basically it was unsaleable because it was, it had been written off the book. So that bin didn't exist anymore.
Sure.
So they just sent it back to Roseau.
A 97 XCR sells for $78,000. What do you think a brand new Dragon will go for?
Right?
Yeah.
We're talking $100,000.
Yeah. I remember bringing it into the shop, and the guys that worked on that said, "What in the hell is that thing doing?" I didn't think I'd ever see that or want to see that one day. So anyway.
No, my dad, he borrowed that Dragon from Josh to test it, see if he wanted to buy it or not. And he said that thing in the ditch would only go 97 miles an hour. And so then my dad thought, well, how hard is Josh having to drive this thing to be that he's competitive, only going 97 miles an hour? So then he ended up bringing it back to Josh, and he's like, I didn't really want to sell it anyways. So.
Yeah.
But then talking about the Fusion, looking back there, your igloo helmets.
Yep.
So that's where me as a kid at the races, when like my brother-in-law Jason Bakke was racing and my dad was racing, I remember you on the Fusion with the igloo helmet.
Yep.
And as a kid, I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was just a concept that we come up with, just something different. I'd wore it. Let's see, Bell helmets was, I don't remember the model or whatever it was, but they were just Bell. I don't know, were they Moto 3s or something? Anyway, Polaris had a deal with Bell at the time, so they had like a race version, so it was pretty much all orange. And then, after that, everybody was, going into different brands. There was a lot of different helmets out there. Rai was a huge one for a long time, and I kept buying these Bell helmets that I'd gotten used to. It's what I had before I started racing even. So the problem with the ones that you bought at, Bob's Cycle or whatever down in the cities is they didn't really meet the orange expectations or the requirements. So we decided, well, let's do a custom paint job, and that was, we had a bunch of different sketches, and it was one of my buddies, I think, just said, hey, why don't you make it like an igloo? It kind of fits fits shaped like an igloo.
Yeah.
It kind of fits the season a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And then, you can have it kind of falling apart in the back with, with orange then underneath, to meet the orange requirement for the rear of the helmet. And like, yeah, that makes sense. So, because one of the Thompson boys here in Roseau painted it for me. He lives at the time he lived just east of town here. And then I have, I had another one, a new bell helmet that would have been the new version. Didn't fit nearly as well as the old one, so I didn't wear it much. But I had that one painted in again by a local gal here. In fact, she did a bunch of hoods for Pro 5, and the hood on the Pro X that Josh and I and Corey won with in 05 was painted by the lady that painted my second Igloo helmet that I never really raced with. But yeah, the blue one, that was Pro X days into the Fusion, and then I stuck with the Bell helmets until I worked a deal out with not FXR, Arctiva Gear. They had helmets and stuff, so we did a 1-year deal with those guys, and then I switched over to FXR, ran FXR helmets, gear, right up until we worked a deal out with Climb. Then in 2010, that's who we've been with ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. So we kind of skimmed over your Soo in 05 with Josh Davis.
Yep.
And then that was the year that you guys brought Corey in during the race.
Yep.
Because he had broke down.
Yep. Yeah, Corey was running I believe it was running an old triple. Still, it was a engine I want to say Shane Wall had put together for one of his Soo sleds. And Pro 5 more than likely owned all the hardware and stuff. But yeah, ended up, I don't know if it was a crankshaft or a piston or what, but he ended up going down. And Josh and I were running, the Pro X was 2 years old, and that was a Pro 5 Feldsky Farm sled. And Corey had been running that specific snowmobile in half miles. We built it the year before for the Soo. And then Corey wanted to go out and run the half-mile circuit in 2004 and 5. So he was running, cross countries here, and he'd go out and he'd race the half miles and use that sled. And I ended up having to go out because I was going to run that snowmobile at the Soo. So I ended up with a new engine, suspension, basically a whole new sled minus the chassis and the plastic and everything in the box of the pickup on the way going out, and I just basically did a full swap in the trailer when I got there, and went out, and I didn't have a driver because up to that point Troy Hansen from Strathcona over here had been riding with me, and then he just decided he didn't want to race the Soo that year, kind of last minute. I kind of was banking on him, then just pulled the pin and like, well, I'll figure it. I'll find somebody out there, do something. And I think it was Brady or Chad. I think it was Brady though. Said, hey, give Josh a call, because I think Josh was supposed to come out with Brian that year and race with him, but Brian didn't have his sled ready to go or something, and just they pulled the pin kind of last minute and decided they weren't coming. So I called up Josh, and I knew Josh vaguely from just him racing. I didn't know him all that well, but he gave me his number anyway. I called him Wednesday night as I was maybe leaving the track or whatever. And Josh asked, he said, well, when do you want me there? And I was like, as soon as you can get here. And I walking down to the pits on Thursday morning, and there's Josh. Perfect. So he must have jumped in the truck and drove all night.
Yep.
So, but yeah, and the way that race turned out, we brought Corey in. It wouldn't have, I don't think, been necessary, but those were decisions that were made outside of conversations with me, and I was still young, so I was just wanting to drive. Yeah, and Josh was doing fine. Obviously, he's new to the team. Nobody really knew his background, but did a very capable job. And since Corey was out, Corey was their ace. He had the most wins at that point out of pretty much anybody around. So they and back then you could pull a lot of fast ones, and there was stuff like that was happening all the time. Yep. Yep. And I don't even know, sometimes if you even needed to have an injury to get somebody to come on. You know, I think you could just, if you burn down, I think you could even just go, you know, get on another team if you wanted. Maybe not. Maybe somebody had to scratch in order for you to get on. But either way, you know, he was told that they were going to bring Corey in, and he needed to go tell the ambulance staff or the EMS or whatever that he couldn't keep going. So he did, and it was a bummer. But I think, you know, later on, you know, the guys at Pro 5 and Mike Stazak and that crew, I think they made it right by giving him the opportunity to come race.
Yep.
You know, so got him what he needed to go race for a few years in cross country, and you know, we came back as a duo for, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9. So raced with them, you know, for basically 5 years. And honestly, probably one of the most reliable guys I know out there. You know, I mean, he's good with equipment. He can ride. I mean, Aaron's phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, Josh is by far, you know, probably one of the best teammates I've ever had.
Yeah. Oh heck yeah.
That's
when we had Josh on, it was pretty good stories too. He said, what was that one?
The snowstorm.
Yeah, you guys
yeah.
left Roseau, got into the UP, and it was a complete whiteout.
Yeah.
You guys were driving, looking out the side windows, judging how far away you were from the snowbank.
Just trying to keep us on the road, you know. We drove through a few snowstorms, but the one in particular that I remember was we were on 28 there going through. Came across the UP, and it wasn't bad when you're in the woods, but then once you got along the lake, it was really bad. So got up to Munising or Christmas, and then basically there was no travel advised at that point. But like, all we got to do is get into Munising and get back into the woods, because right here it sucks. And that was where we were. You couldn't even see the hood of the pickup, so you're looking out the side window, you know, trying to see the white line. And I remember Josh, he was driving in his Dodge, barely moving,
just chugging.
We did the same thing this year.
And he, I remember all of a sudden the truck started to go down like he was going in the ditch. He's like, whoa! Backed up, and we kept going. It was like an hour drive from Christmas to Munising, and it's only like 3 miles.
Yeah.
I think you said at one point you guys just stopped.
Yeah.
Like you just stopped on the road.
We did. You know, and I'm like, we got to keep moving because we're sitting ducks here. Like, if a log truck comes, they're just going to drive right over us.
Yeah.
But hopefully they weren't out on the road. But anyway, we made it into Munising, and, you know, then, definitely the rest of the way was good. I don't know if it was that trip or not, but I remember coming into the Soo, and it had been, like, storming and raining and stuff, so everything was glare ice. And we come into that first exit, where, you know, like where Applebee's is and stuff.
Oh, yep.
Come into that one, and the exit kind of wide off. It split, and if you were going to go left, go back over the interstate, there was a stop sign, but otherwise you could take the loop and you know, follow traffic and get into town there. And we weren't stopped. I remember coming on that exit. We weren't going fast, but we were. Truck was sliding. Josh was like, "Whoa." I remember he's like, you know, we're taking the snowbank, and up over the curb through the snowbank, plowed the stop sign right over onto the road, and he's like, "Well, we made her." Took off and went to the track.
Man.
Every time I come in on that exit now, I remember that.
You just hear Josh. Not too worried, but a little bit.
Yeah.
No, Josh is pretty funny.
Yeah.
My dad was helping him in the I-500 one year, and they'd finished going to drive the trailer over to the work area, so they had all the tools and everything right there. And they drive it over there, and then Josh opens the door and here's the toolbox. It just laid all out. My dad forgot to like lock it or strap it up or something, and my dad's like, "Oh God!" And then Josh is like, "Well, I was going to reorganize it anyways." Not phased by it at all.
Anything works.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
No,
you.
What is this?
You got
Thanks,
the dew.
Harley.
yeah, Mountain Dew.
Ooh. Wow, this is fancy. This is an awesome place, by
This
the
is
way.
great.
This is cool as hell.
What do you got going on the rest of the day? I'm going to stick around.
Right? Oh, shoot. Well, Sunday fun day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 07 Pro Open Pro Stock champion. But you didn't win a race.
Well, in stock. So I had some
Oh, okay.
open wins.
Yep.
And
I think I wrote it down. It was 13 second places.
right.
Oh, wow.
I know. That's between both, open and stock,
Oh, okay.
obviously. But, that was, I think, probably the year Don Jorst did. He tagged me as a bridesmaid.
Yeah.
So for a few years after that, while he was still announcing, that was,
Yeah.
kind of the standing joke. But yeah, 07, I mean, basically how it turned out was, Brian should have had the points locked up because he was the one that I was battling with
Yeah.
pretty much exclusively. And he'd win by multiple times by 2 or 3 seconds on a 100-mile race. And I remember Pat coming up to me, and you could almost just see it in his eyes, like he was just bummed because like he did it again, which Brian was a great racer. So there's no reason, not taking anything away from him, but he just, was right there and was lucky. And I drove my tail off most of the time, to try to be there, which you had to do because Brian was so fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, if he wouldn't have had the incident with Ross in the I-500 that year, that was the year that Ross won the I-500.
Yep.
And gotten knocked out the first day, he would have won the points, hands down. But since that happened, that was a big points race. I think it was two races worth of points.
Oh, sure.
I think first and second day where it was a points, points allocation, and then the last day 3 was a points allocation. So even if he probably would have finished 2 days, he probably would have locked it up. Because I remember going into Munising, and I had to be at a certain point in order to lock the points up. So, hey, Jagger. So yeah, no, that was kind of, and that was why I really liked that 07 sled too. It worked good. It was durable. The suspension, we kind of had figured out from the year before with the Fusion, and yeah, overall, if it wouldn't have been for Brian, we would have had a whole bunch of wins.
Yeah. I think a lot of people could say that about Brian.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it, Brian.
Yeah. It's pretty neat that you guys started racing at the same time and like throughout the whole career.
Yeah.
That's the story.
Right. Yeah, no, he got going a little earlier than I did, but growing up how he did with who he did, and
Yeah.
made sense. But man, he's talented. He's a competitive guy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very, very
You can put it that way. Yeah.
Very competitive.
Seems like it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I asked him, after he kind of hung it up, and I said, "No, don't you ever have an itch to come back?" And he's like, "No, I just can't do it. I was too dang competitive, like with myself, not just with other racers. He was never happy.
Yep.
Even when he'd win, he wasn't happy. Like, I should have won by more.
Exactly.
So he'd go home and beat himself up, get up at 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning, and start thrashing on stuff to try to get faster. So that's why
When he told us the story that he was soldering jets and then drilling half jets,
Making half
it was like
sizes.
it's like, oh, okay.
You're in the detail right there.
right.
So you brought up the 2010 I-500. As I was doing my research here, I found an interview with you and Chad Colby,
Oh,
and you and Dan Ebert got stuck side by side together in the same ditch. Do you remember that?
no, I don't.
Really?
We got stuck side by side. How did he?
You came in and got stuck, went over the sled or something of
Okay.
sorts, and then
Yeah.
Dan tried to take a higher line and came in and got stuck mired in right next to you, and some bystanders had to
Help us out.
help you out.
That must not have been on the last day, though.
No, and it didn't say what day it was
Yeah.
from.
It's possible. I remember a few incidences in the I-500 where ended up not on the snowmobile. And it could have been 2010. There's a handful of them. But
You said there was very few words exchanged while you guys were standing there next to each other.
funny. Yeah, I'm gonna have to dig up that interview.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So
Heck yeah. I'll probably jog some memories.
so it was right around that time too when you kind of started the team. Like Bunke Racing became more than just you. It was yourself, Bobby Minnie, Spencer Cadlick, Jen Fuller, Jeff Klein.
Yep.
What was the reasoning on starting that?
So that was the girls. The Jeff's wife, Paula, at the time, her and Thora got to be good friends, and Paula was, she saw the opportunity from, the marketing side, and, in order to get to, that next level, she figured, well, you gotta have a brand, so that's kind of where it stemmed off from. And, when we decided to bring Bobby in, he was a young kid. He just graduated from high school when, we basically decided to go race with him. And nothing was like, it wasn't like an official signed document, contract or anything like that. It was a handshake kind of deal. But Senior was the race director at the time, and he he supported us on it, and got us the equipment that we needed. So I supplied a sled or two to Bobby, and then supplied him all the parts and the location in Fargo to wrench out of. And going into it, didn't have any, I guess, apprehension that anything was, not going to work or whatever. So in the first year, it went pretty good. I think the toughest thing was, trying to balance out, Jeff was still racing at the time. Jeff and I, met through snowmobiles in Fargo, at the Fargo-Moorhead area. And he and Paula were living in Fargo. We were living in Moorhead, and just happened to be, fellow Polaris riders, right? And Jeff decided to, start racing 06. So that was probably more, even earlier than that, 04, 05, because I remember he had a Pro X. So he raced a handful of years, never really got into the groove as far as, being super competitive. He crashed a lot, which wasn't, extremely healthy for him. So we kind of tailored it into, an opportunity to keep rolling. He always wanted to ride though, so it was a tough call. But anyway, we eventually got to that, and he raced the Soo a couple of times, once with Colby and then once with the Faust. So he decided to hang it up after that, which at some point in time we all get to that, and then he was just primarily wrenching, and it was busy enough with myself and Bobby, Spencer, Jen. Taylor was racing there for a little bit. 2013-14 time frame was when Taylor got involved, and we had the trailer jam-packed full of sleds every weekend, and more sleds and boxes of pickups, and it was a bit of a disaster. But yeah, the Bunke Racing entity, in a sense, came from the girls wanting to, try to market something and brand something. And social media was kind of kicking off, or we were seeing more of that stuff going on. And Paula was the one that kind of spearheaded it. And, Thora was more on the backside, just taking pictures and videos and helping with press releases and stuff like that. But Paul and I did a couple of trips, actually, just her and I going around to different sponsors, and did a trip out to Wyoming and Idaho, went to climb, and then met with Togany Mountain Lodge, tried a few other different places just to try to, gain some traction. We did a ride one year at Togany Mountain Lodge with somebody that we gave a trip away to in the spring of the year after the race season. So that was all just kind of bits and pieces of creating the brand.
What about Subway? How did Subway come in?
That was another one. So Subway, local, they're everywhere. Happened to know the local franchise owner through friends, and then he was also, I believe he was somebody that came into Buffalo Wild Wings a whole bunch. And my wife, Thora, used to work there, so ended up getting to know him and sold him on a opportunity. We got a couple of sleds from Polaris, basically at bomb cost, and was able to go ahead and do a giveaway. So we were promoting both Polaris and Subway on that. We did. It was kind of funny. We did the year that we gave this 120 away. We did little oval race on in between periods at a Sioux game in Grand Forks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so brought cool. 2 wrap 120s down, and I can't remember how we picked the kids to ride them. I don't know if it was my nephews or what the deal was. Britta was too little at the time. She was probably 3 or 4. Anyway, we that was another good relationship that the girls brought in. And, lots of stuff just flourished through that time, and still, I guess, really appreciated all the work that they did.
Yeah, that's where I was curious about it. I didn't know if it was Polaris that wanted you to start something and they'd support you more if you kind of became your own entity of,
sure,
we'll support this much more if you...
Kind of what it turned into.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Polaris pushing it as much as it was us just trying to get in. I think the snowcross world was doing it.
Yeah.
And you had, a bunch of those big teams, and the girls were seeing that, and I just wanted to go ride, go racing. But they saw that opportunity, and, then we started kind of doing a spin-off on parts and services and stuff, like redoing shocks, selling shock kits, selling, indie kits and stuff like that. So partnered up with, some different people on being able to buy stuff at a real good, real good rate, and turn around and sell it, trying to make money, just to try to stay alive. At a certain point there, I did, envision it, like, okay, this could potentially be a Speedworks or a Wall Brothers, someday.
Sure.
But the reality is it's snowmobile world's a small world.
Yep.
If once I realized that, if it's gonna ever flourish into that, you have to probably also be in the off-road industry as well. And I knew nothing about off-road stuff, and didn't really. Not that I didn't care about it. It's like, it's just not something that I'm super interested about. Yeah. Like in the summertime, I don't want to go riding razors or stuff like that out in the woods or out in the desert or whatever. I want to go to the lake.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you didn't have the same drive for it as you did for the sleds.
Right. Yeah. You spent that much time and effort through the winter that basically you just needed to check out for a while and do, and the kids were young. Taylor was a teenager. Bull was little, and, Britta was a baby, and there was just a lot of family stuff going on.
Yeah.
Too. Luckily, they just decided the wintertime was okay. They chased me around racing.
Yeah. Worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
So then 12, 13, 14, and 16, 17, you went on a pretty damn good run at the Sioux.
Yep.
15 was the year Wes and Brian won when it got cut short, right?
Yep.
Okay. But like 12, 13, 14, 3 years in a row, you and Aaron. Oh, and Bobby was part of the 12 team too. So that's the 2012 sled right there.
Yep. Yeah. So 2011 it started. We had a really good year. Aaron crashed. Ended up, we should have. If he wouldn't have crashed, we would have won there too. And then 12, basically, we had the upper hand because we had 2 to 3 years of experience with this equipment. And once we, made it known that this was superior over this old stuff, everybody tried to play catch up.
Yep.
And it took until about 15, 16 time frame for them to actually get caught back up.
Yeah. Once those edges finally were too old to even race, then it's like, well, we got to change now.
Right.
And yeah, you guys were already on them for years.
Right.
So yeah, you're already ahead.
Our notebook was already established, and our suspension packages, were pretty straightforward. It slowly progressed, and we got more advanced as things went on, for sure. But we kept it pretty simple for the first 3 to 4 years. Engine packages got a little better each year, more refined. I remember 2014 was probably the fastest Sioux sled I ever had.
Really?
You could just come out of the corner and you just kind of roll into the throttle and you just kind of passed everybody. Which wasn't normally the case because, especially early on, not everybody, but most of the teams are giving her. They want to, try to get to the front. You got to get in the lead, before lap 10.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever.
What year did it turn into like a sprint race? Did it feel like?
An all-day sprint race. It was probably right around that era.
Yeah, okay.
Where we felt like you needed to be fast all day long and try to make it through clean. Where, there were, and you can still make up time, but I mean, for a long time there, it didn't matter. You just needed to stay clean.
Yeah.
You could go down 2-3 laps and then you just keep clicking laps off because more than likely those guys that are running super fast, they're going to break down at some point.
Yeah.
Which still 90% of them do.
Yeah.
95% of them do. Like if you're pushing that hard, and it's just the way that day rolls. Like it's 500 miles. It's a long day.
Yeah.
To have everything flat out. I mean, we've had plenty of bobbles where we went down a lap stuck in the pits because you dropped a brake pad in a belly pan or something. So it's, things happen, and we're all human. We all make mistakes. So let's try to keep it out of the bales.
Yeah. Well, like even to this day, like they talk about like how this is a sprint race now and how it used to be different. And
yeah, it was. In fact, the first couple of wins, 2002, 2005, even starting 2010, 11, you basically just needed to stay out of trouble because the guys that were running fast, running hard, were probably going to, have some problems. And Corey was good about, having that attitude, that mentality. So I was, fortunate to learn a lot from him through the first, 10 plus years going there. And he, he was definitely one to be consistent. So, yeah.
What about those years like 06, 07, 08 when the Yamahas were dominating? Were they that fast where it was just...
Well, they were fast, and then they had the fuel efficiency game to play too. So they could make it to the plow break. So they always had track position.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, straightaway speeds, they're wicked fast.
Hell yeah.
The only thing that we had, to contend with was corner speed. Driving into the corners, through the bumps, through the corners. But then, as they progressed and got better, got their handling better, stuff like that, it got more challenging. So,
Yeah.
No, that was right away, big, heavy 4-cylinder, they were fast, but they either broke or they were slow at some point in the day when it got rough and bumpy. But then, changing the rule to that 3-cylinder was the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah. After 3 years in a row, it's like, that's enough of that. Those, you can't have those anymore.
Right. But then you guys figured out, that 3-cylinder ended up being, pretty good too.
Yeah. Well, was it 2013 when Ross and Ree were doing really good on the nitro there, and then it ended up the motor went on that. But Ree led like 100 laps on that thing, and that was looking promising when they were on that nitro.
Yeah, it's essentially the same engine package that you're familiar with, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, those are pretty pretty durable, robust engines.
Oh yeah.
I think Brian Strasswell told me it was it had the banking of the turn had kept moving the oil to the right side of the engine.
No kidding.
So I think it was the bearing like behind the primary clutch that maybe starved from oil.
Huh.
Wow.
That's neat.
Is what I think Brian. I remember Brian telling me that or something.
Yeah, he's a sharp cat.
Mm-hmm.
One. He's been around.
Yeah, many years.
Yep.
What about the Noble Triple Crown? That was
Yeah.
only a one and done thing.
Yeah, no, I think it didn't it run in 2 years. Maybe it didn't. I know 15. It was fully active in 15.
Yeah, when they came to Pine Lake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Was Pine Lake part of it?
Yep.
No.
Well, it was kind of part of it. It was it brought a couple Michigan guys here, and that was when they did that team race in Herf and Wes won. It was a pro open Noble
Okay.
thing, and it was a team.
When did Chad win it with it when it was a team?
Huh?
In 15.
Oh, and you hit that berm on.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you'd hit a berm Saturday morning during the parade lap in the dark.
It's embarrassing.
Well, talk about it then. What happened?
We so yeah, that would have been December probably of 15.
I believe so.
So it would have been the 2016 season. So yeah, so that would have been the second year of the No Bull then, because in 2015 that was the first year. That was the year that I ran. That was so the Soo was it was we'll get to the
Okay,
yeah. I'm trying to get the dates lined up. So Aaron and I ran this sled right here in Kinross. That was the first race of the No Bull.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second race was the Soo, and the third race was Lincoln. And if you won all three, you won like a $25,000 bonus check or something like that. And so the 2015 Soo, we ended up third. We had a sled that was, a winning sled. Like we led a whole bunch of laps, but they cut it short. And that was, it was kind of I basically almost didn't sleep for a year after that one. But I came in against the rest of the crews, as plow lap at like 240 or something like that.
Yep.
And they can technically call the race after 250 laps. So it's a halfway point, or 251 laps.
Oh.
So the guys were like, there's a storm coming in, you got to stay out. I'm like, they're plowing, I got to come in. If I don't come in and have a fresh ski,
Yeah.
I'll go backwards as soon as they throw the green flag. So it was my judgment against theirs. They were looking at it, well, there's no way they're going to keep going. And I was like, it's not that bad out here. They're going to keep going. So I came in, and Dick and Wes?
Yep.
Dick and Wes and a whole bunch of other guys, they all stayed out. They basically played that card. But if I would have stayed out, maybe they would have come in.
Yeah.
So I was leading. So since I went in, they decided to stay out. And yeah, came in and was mid-pack or whatever when they threw the green flag. We made it one lap, and then they threw the caution again. Then it went red, and then they called the race.
Oh, geez.
But I made it into third place, basically, is where I finished. But, because we had won the first No Bull, then that would have been the second one if we could have got the win there. And then we had a good sled. This was our half-mile sled. We had it all set up, ready to go, went to Lincoln. And we were running pretty good there, but, ended up not getting the win. So, but then going into that December, so that was the year after. 2015 was the year after I blew my shoulder out in War Road. So that was a rehab year for me, but I still did, pretty good. I was 85, 90%. And then I made it into that next fall, and then I blew this shoulder out in Pine Lake when I hit that. It was the test course is what it was.
Yep.
And on one of the straightaways going across the lake, going away from the pits, it was, right at dusk, right away in the morning, and it was dry, cold. So I was on the edge of the track trying to get some snow. And all of a sudden, there's the freaking berm and just kind of, locked up and hit it, and sled went up and, came down kind of sideways, threw me off, blew my shoulder out.
Did you hit the inside of the berm or like the outside of the?
I don't specifically remember. I think what they did was they plowed the course through the test course.
Through it.
So I was on the edge where there wasn't a lot of snow, and then all of a sudden I came to a berm that was a foot or 2 foot high.
Bang.
Yeah.
I remember that morning. It was quite the ordeal that had happened on the parade lap.
So anyway, that wasn't fun. That was kind of the beginning of the end, though. I mean, that was when I realized that, shit, you can get hurt. And it sucks. And then also Taylor was, getting more and more competitive, and, it started getting harder to keep our equipment maintained. We'd kind of sidelined having multiple racers, so it was just primarily Taylor and I. Then we had the Soo program going, which absorbed a ton of our effort. And then, by 2017, I was running 50% capacity in cross country, and still the lead driver at the Soo. Aaron was our closer. I always started. It was just kind of the way that we ran it. And
because then 16, 17, Taylor came on the team, and then those 2 wins there, and then 20 was your last year.
Yep.
Because then I've asked you at the races sometimes, like, oh, do you wish it, you miss it, you want to come back? And then you always tell me the story from 2020, when you said you knew you were done.
Yeah, pretty much. So up until the last 2 years that I raced, I think I only raced Pine Lake and the Soo.
Oh, really?
Yep. And I was busy at work, so it'd put me on the road. Just made it tough. Try to make it back so we could get to the racetrack. Bull was racing in the sport class, or started in the juniors, then up in the sport class. So it was, I remember signing up for Nadawash in 2018 or 19. Well, Taylor won Nadawash in 2018, and I remember not running the final just because I ran qualifying, and was like, we just got too much going on.
Yeah. Someone needs to stop racing here eventually.
Somebody needs to stop racing. And, so in 19, we had good runs at Pine Lake, 2018 too, or 17 or 18, whenever the race happened. And then in 2020, I was just super busy at work and just didn't go into the season in the right mentally, state of mind. We still had everything going on.
Yeah.
So Taylor was racing. We had the Soo program going. Lots of, effort towards that. So I wasn't going to, not go racing because I didn't want to let anybody down. Aaron was still super competitive, at cross country and at the Soo, and went there, and, Taylor this is his like first year that he was going to, actually get laps in the 74 sled. And he did a great job. He and Aaron, brought the thing in. I started the race, ran 75 laps, and those 2 guys rallied and, ran a clean race and brought it in for the win. And, I knew after I got off the sled, like I'm sure I've told you before, like, I'll get back on if I have to, but if I don't have to, I'm good. That's it, and I remember announcing at the banquet, and everybody in the crowd's like, "Oh yeah, you'll be back next year." Like, we'll see.
But you knew in the back of your head, like, I'm done.
I'm done.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, and then it was probably, the next year was COVID, so we didn't have a race.
Yep.
And then went back 2 years later. That was when Aaron broke his collarbone.
Yep.
And I did have my gear with, but in the back of my mind, it was going to be a long shot.
Yeah.
And I hadn't been on the sled. He broke his collarbone in the shootout Thursday night, and everybody was just kind of assumed I'd throw the helmet back on. And I'm like, dude, guys, I haven't been on a sled in 2 years on a racetrack. And the last time I was on this racetrack, I didn't feel like I should be out there. Luckily.
That was this year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
So that was the year when Troy got hurt in the shootout as well. And then me and Ryan were riding, and we broke that spindle. That was one we should have won.
Oh yeah.
Ryan still has nightmares about it, he says.
Yeah. It happens.
Have you ever crashed at Soo?
Me?
Yeah.
No, not
You've never been in them hay bales?
not gonna wood. No.
Again, it's not wood.
I know, right?
It's not going to work.
But Kyle, you had your first laps at the Soo this year.
Yeah.
Your first Soo experience. Like
Yeah.
to win 8 of those
Yeah.
is unreal.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty cool. One of the most memorable. Taylor was on the sled, and it was right before the crash. It was parade laps or caution laps before the crash, and I'm putzing down the straightaway, and Taylor, wow! I was like, you can't do that. And then he's pointing to me, he's gonna, yeah. I was like, oh. And then, I think I was right behind you, and then I watched it go up into the bales, and then come around the next lap, and I seen the windshield laying there. I thought about stopping and grabbing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not one place you want to go to the bales at, but I can say that I've been in there once. I was fortunate. It wasn't until probably 2019, I think, when I went in. It was kind of a fluke deal. We had we were running some thicker brake pads, trying to get a little bit, maybe get by with one less stop.
Yeah.
But basically overfilled the reservoir with fluid, and so there was slight pressure on the pads. And as you warmed it up,
yep.
Everything, so about, I felt it during qualifying too, but we didn't run enough laps
Yeah.
to actually get it to a point where it wouldn't release the brakes. So, but yeah, there was a couple of times when I'd come in with a brand new fresh set of pads, and like you come into pit road and it felt like the brakes were on. Like, what the hell's going on? And then I think it was right after a brake change or something, we went back out, and because we started with a good set of season pads, and then probably put a fresh set on after the first run or something, and went out, came into 3, and Travis Fellis was right behind me, and got in, tapped the brake to come in, and let go, and then I was gonna get back into the throttle and get a drift going, and like the brakes didn't release. The thing just kept sliding.
Oh, God.
I was sideways going down, coming into 3, and ass over tea kettle we went, and it wasn't anything too serious. I think buggered up the windshield, so I threw a different hood on it, went back out. But yeah, it happens. It happens.
God, what a weird feeling that would be. To let go of the brakes, but they're still on, and just feeling the sled just keep sliding. Oh my God, just sickening. Feel your stomach like just drop.
Right. So anyway, that happened.
But only once though.
Only once.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
That's really good.
At that track.
Yeah.
I've gone into the bales and many others, but that was one time at the Soo.
How, when you were doing the no bowl triple crown stuff there, how'd you like the Myra half mile
mile?
stuff?
I don't particularly, do that well. Usually at the half miles, because it's so much of a sprint format. It feels like they're shorter. You have to run fast and hard. But we did win in Kinross that one time, and I've run a handful of others, but it's a lot more exhausting, and I was never one of those guys that was in, like brute gym shape. I had endurance, but I wasn't one of those guys that was just wicked strong. And my build, having wicked long legs and being tall and stuff, it takes a lot to get yourself on and off the sled, hanging onto the thing all day long. And so I always kind of struggled there. I didn't necessarily. I would have spent more time out there if I'd have, felt more comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm.
The sprint format was, or I guess it's still considered enduro, but it felt like it was more of a sprint.
Sure.
Usually most of them were about 100 miles long, 100 to 150 miles, I think. Even Lincoln. What's Lincoln? Is that 300 laps?
No, when I was there, my last time was 250.
So 250 on a half mile lap? So 125 miles.
Yeah.
I mean,
Goes pretty quick.
it was real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuel once. And
No, we would stop every 60 laps.
60?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So every 30 miles.
Yeah.
Huh.
That ain't that much.
No.
That's not that long.
No.
But it feels like you just drove 200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
because those 30
getting it.
miles.
Yeah.
You're just
Constantly
using
work.
it like if you could do like 30 laps to the left and then 30 laps to the right.
Right.
Change it up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sleds aren't set up to turn that way.
No. So move into some current stuff here. These mini mods that you guys are building nowadays.
Yeah.
We've talked on the show here a couple times that if you guys built these into like a Bunke Racing mini mod kit, that these player snowcross sleds, you can find them pretty cheap on Facebook Marketplace. That if you were building these kits, you would sell them.
You think so?
If you could,
I think so.
like I know
Buy
like
one tomorrow.
like Bose ran good this last year, but then I remember you saying you had a little bit of trouble with Taylors, that it would just kind of be in and out.
Yeah, it was a little bit more temperamental. So we never really put our finger on it. We changed a whole bunch of parts trying to understand what was going on. And it ran better as we progressed. So I don't know if it was a stack up of things that was making it, do what it was doing. And it was just, that's maybe the package. Maybe they are more temperamental. So, but that was kind of the whole purpose of the build, right?
Yeah.
The second build. The first build, maybe that was a unicorn. Maybe that thing just happened to, just everything just aligned and everything just worked good because, when we came to Pine Lake with that 2 years ago, in Bull one,
Yeah.
it was like, what the heck?
It was like the rest of us were like, "Oh wow!"
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Like,
122 miles an hour? Is that
yeah,
what it was?
well, it had a couple of spots where, we were over 120. That's my goal is to hit, get one of those two sleds up to 125 miles an hour.
Holy crap.
That's my goal.
That's a good goal.
It has to be, like a perfect storm. Like
Yeah.
you have to have
with the
tailwind
wind
and you have to have. Come over here, Jagger. This guy over here needs it.
Thank you, buddy. That's great.
But it's crazy to see your single pipe package at like 120, and then Alex Sateen's twin pipe package at also 120 also.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see the two different.
Right. It's interesting. It shouldn't, per the math, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
But what I think is what's going on, and the single pipe for some, it's not that it's got the same amount of power or more power. It doesn't. It should as far as the numbers go, dyno sheets, all that stuff, it's down on power, but it's not a lot at 150 horse. If it's 5 horse, it's pretty minimal.
Does the single pipe make more torque on bottom end so you can pull a taller gear?
No, we're pulling the same gear. I'm not sure if I don't think it's pulling more torque. It would be like twin pipes that are, I think anyway, it's going to be a little bit more temperamental. Like we've had some issues. We burnt them down a couple of times, right? So you're flowing 2 cylinders through one pipe through, I can't think of, I don't know the diameter right off the top of my head, but it's just a single stinger coming out, right? Where when you have twin pipes, you have, 2 stingers in each one in each pipe. So you have each piston or each exhaust pipe taking that heat, where I think the single pipe, you're blowing two holes right into one pipe. The thing gets hot quick. It heats quick. It lights hard. So there's that piece of it. And then one thing that we've noticed with the twin pipers, they don't like to carry over, go into that overwind.
Sure.
Where we can get this single pipe to overwind, no problem. Like it's easy. So, and that's where we're seeing, like, the thing only runs about 114 or 115 until you get a tailwind or in somebody's draft.
Yeah.
And then it just keeps going.
Shifts out.
Yeah.
I remember-
we target 8650 or 8700, and when those guys are seeing, 122 miles an hour, it's damn near running $9,000.
When Taylor passed me in the qualifier at Nadawash, not this year, but last year in the qualifier, and I got right behind him out of the corner, and he just pulled, and there was no catching his draft on how fast that thing was pulling away from me.
Right.
It was unreal, because I think they said that Taylor was at 120 and then Tate was at like 118 that day too. So it was a pretty good tailwind, but when you're going that fast pulling away, it's just, there's not even a chance in grabbing a draft off of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it is. It's pretty, they're pretty fun.
So make that a kit.
Yeah.
And people will buy them.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, the race department's got all the parts.
Yeah.
And as far as like taking a used snowcross sled, so that scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I know it's doable, but you just never know what you're going to get for a sled.
Yeah.
You know, some of those things are fairly beat up. I like starting with new equipment.
Yeah.
You know, and then you end up with a fairly expensive build by the time you're done. And the snowcross sled today is a 136, and I still like the 128. So you have to go back and get a 16 service chassis, an 18 service chassis, and and then
Then you're ground up.
Yeah, then basically that's what all of ours are. They start with, it's either, I think the first one we built, we started with a 16 service chassis, and then last year we got an 18 service chassis, so we had to change the overstructure and do all the other stuff because we like the single post steering post, which you don't need. Like pretty much everybody's running the dual post now, that's what's stock with snowcross. Single pipe does make it easier to because you don't have to change the steering hoop configuration for twin pipes, things like that. So there are some things that would be fairly straightforward. The rear suspension's different on a 136, so I don't know how to. I think you can probably get the 128 skid in there. If I'm not mistaken, that's what Ross runs. It's a 128 skid in a 136 tunnel.
Yeah, at the Soo, if you could guarantee the same speed between a 128 and a 136, do you think it would? Do you think we'll ever see? We've went from the 121s to the 128s. Do you think we'll ever see going to 136s?
It's a really, really good question. Potentially.
Yeah.
I don't think there's. We've seen very little to maybe even some speed gains going from 128 to 136 in our stalkers with cross country and stuff. So I think it's something. There's something there. And do you know of if anybody's tried it?
I don't. Not currently. No, I don't.
So everybody's still working with the 128 for the most part.
Yeah.
So yeah. Somebody's just got to try it.
Yeah. And then we've had a few ideas on here of the 12 hours of Pine Lake.
Ooh.
Or Pine Lake 250. 12 hours.
What would I rather see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As like a spin-off event.
Yep.
12 hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Light plants, and the track looks like a hand. So it's all straights and corners.
Yeah, light plants in every corner so you can see where you're going.
Yeah.
At least you have something to target towards. Or else 250 miles of just normal run-in with fuel stops.
I think the 12-hour would be cool. A 250 would definitely throws another, makes it that much better than it is right now as far as like a distance race goes. But you could probably run a 250 in 3 hours, right?
Yeah, if we're doing 100, well, we did this last year, 110 miles in an hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So
right around there. Yeah.
Yeah. So 12 hours, what would we have? About 700 miles?
yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool.
That would be so cool. That's my favorite idea. Yeah. That's what I want to see on Pine Lake.
12 hours of Pine Lake, because like the Soo average is like 8.5 to 9 hours or so is kind of for 500 miles there. But no, that's the ideas we've drum up on here so far. So
yeah, that would be cool. Stalkers, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or open.
Open.
Yeah.
Just
Bring
Anything goes.
old school Nadawash Snowdio open rules.
bring what you got.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I'd bring a 07 Yamaha Apex.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gosh.
10,500 RPMs all day long.
Just screaming.
Yep.
Yeah. And just a couch of a seat to sit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It is a grandpa
It
machine.
might not
It's
turn
awesome.
the best, but you'll just be able to make passes.
I would think
right.
about getting one of them Thundercats with power steering. Just spin laps.
Oh, a
all
turboed
day.
one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
With spin laps all day long.
You'd probably 12 hours of that. You'd probably end up like. Remember Roger Skyme told us the story of he was up in Alaska
Blowing tracks.
testing tracks on the Thundercat, and then he ended up with some vertigo after going wide open for that whole day. He said his mind was just going like that.
Really?
Yeah, and they brought him into the doctor and everything, and he was better. But you'd probably end up with something like that after 12 hours of Pine Lake.
Well, that dude just set a world record. How many miles did he go in 24 hours on a Thundercat?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yep. I
He didn't
forgot
get
about
vertigo.
that. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you'd have to limit the CC to some
Yeah.
extent.
yeah. It'd probably be just a pro stock rule.
Yeah.
600s.
And no class is just the no, like, pro class would be what it is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the old 500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
And then
Put her together.
just like you're, we'll bring it up to Chad. See
Yeah.
what Chad can do for us.
The week after Pine Lake.
The challenging part is getting, things like tracks to live.
Yep.
I think, for that long of a distance. In like, I would say an ice track for us, there's no way we see 500 miles out of one
No.
before we start, looking at putting new one in. Like, it maybe go for 700 miles, but you're starting to lose lugs. And then you go in, you get into scenarios where you start seeing heat issues,
I
if it
get
starts
over
getting rough.
1,000 miles on them,
Really?
but then you don't have any outside lugs then.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Inch and a quarter?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep. Well, we're poor. We run until it's there's no outside lugs left, and then they say, "Well, your studs are too long." It's like, well,
The lugs are
the
gone.
lugs are all gone.
That's
Sorry.
it. Lucas Vady at Nadawash, the whole outside of his track was on a Cobra track.
Yeah.
All the lugs were tore off, so it was just stud. It was like, oh, stud.
Yeah. But then, like at Walker this year, I had that one derail and tore the outside belting off a little bit. But you bring up the inch and a quarter, and then I had a topic here: the current state of cross country racing. Did you have any debates on the inch and a quarter, 1 inch track rule? When
we implemented it?
well, it was just a few months ago that Chad put out something on Facebook asking opinions on 1 inch tracks or inch and a quarter tracks for ice racing.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I like the 1 inch track just because of the durability standpoint. I think our hacksaw tracks are that we're running, the 14 wide hacksaw tracks, 1 inch. They're relatively, close to what the standard ripsaw is as far as like a fingered type configuration. So you still get some of that lug blowing off, but the speed's there. I don't know. I started with like 3/4 inch tracks, back in the day. So as we progressed, 1 inch track was like a deep lug track. So, and now the norm is inch and a quarter. So, I don't think we want to like go back to 1 inch tracks exclusively for just ice racing. I think that just adds a bunch more complexity to the builds and stuff for some of these guys. They think they need to do it, and these tracks aren't cheap these days.
No.
So let's try to keep what we got going. I think works. In heck, a handful of racers like the inch and a quarter better than the 1 inch. Zach seems to have that in the back of his mind. He likes the inch and a quarter better. I know Pepple, he's all in on the inch and a quarter. He took his 1 inch off this year off of his little mini mod build.
Oh, really?
He had and put an inch and a quarter in for Walker, and then raced it in Walker and in Nadawash with the inch and a quarter. And he swears by the inch and a quarter. Doesn't think it's any slower, but I'm pretty sure that the 1 inch is faster.
A little bit, yeah.
Big end.
Do you have any other hot topics or hot takes of of anything you'd like to see changed or different, or
You know,
or anything you want to put out there to the world?
well, we'll see what happens here at the Soo. One thing I'd like to see at the Soo anyway, as far as cross country goes, I'll have to think about that. But we just had that owners meeting here a few weeks ago. I called in and
Alex Hattin said it was like 6 hours long.
oh yeah, it was all day.
Holy
Like,
shit.
I just I had my computer set up here in the shop, and I had time to figure out how to stream my computer over. I was walking around. And I had the wireless speakers going, and I just turn your radio off for a while and start screwing off. But yeah, it was a big old chat session. Like, I'm sure if you were on site, they fed you for one, so that ate up some time. But yeah, it was all day. And then we brought up trying to figure out how to get more track time. Like, one of the things, for qualifying, like, qualifying sucks. Like, it's there all freaking day long, and you get on the track and like you come in and your pipe isn't even hot yet. So it's like, well, what are we doing? Like, there's no value other than like potential track position. There's no value to anything we're doing. As far as maybe some handling stuff, but as far as like clutching or jetting, or some of us are still jetting.
I didn't know if I wanted to bring that up too. Is that you guys are still running a carbureted model?
Yeah, we can get into that after a bit. But the format that we're running, I think right now at the Soo for qualifying is it's kind of boring, and it's not a super big value add exercise to try to tune at. And so, we sign up for the shootout, with hopes that we can actually make the shootout, and then try to hopefully get through the stages of the shootout so you can actually get some laps on, so you can do a fuel economy and you can get some heat in the pipe and you can test some clutching. So there's a lot of weight thrown on, trying to learn as much as you can in those little sessions as you can, so you can get to that bigger session at the end of the week to actually get out there and learn something.
Yeah.
And one of the topics that we brought up was, maybe a qualifying session, kind of like what they do for the rookie practice, but then having it timed.
Oh,
so
sure.
You're running laps out there, but so it's like what snowcross and supercross is doing. You go out there and you're running a bunch of laps. It's a half hour long or whatever it happens to be, and you're on the clock, and they take your fastest 2 laps, and that's your qualifying time. So that way you're out there for the only thing that would suck is if somebody throws her into the bales and it screws up your qualifying session, right? So there's some different things that we could try to figure out how to do. But anyway, there was hopefully some traction, some positivity that came out of that, to maybe see, some sort of a format change there. And I think it would also help if you did do that, like especially in the evening, it would help bring some people out to actually see some qualifying.
Yeah.
That is a little more fun to watch than just 3 sleds going out there that don't even catch each other.
Yeah.
Because you could play some games. The more I thought about it, it's like, well, you could have a hot rod sled out there and, maybe something that you wouldn't race the 500 with, and you could, start, pulling some drafts and stuff like that with your I-500 sled, and like there's some games that you could play that would be, kind of fun, but it's a lot of extra work, so probably wouldn't ever do it. But, but and then as far as cross country format or rules, I can't think of anything right now. I really like the format that we have, on the ice tracks with, the mod class type racing. I know there's been some chatter as far as trying to get back to more of a stock format where you're running stock sleds more, which I understand. I understand the ask or the want to do that from maybe some of the promoters or the OEMs and stuff like that, but I don't know. I like the fact that we have a place to do mod
like
testing.
Yeah.
You know, class type racing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's expensive, but so is racing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I didn't really care for the switch to six laps at the end of the year for the fuel stop debacle.
Right.
It's 100-mile pro open final on Saturday, 100-mile pro stock on Sunday.
Right. I don't necessarily agree with that either. I think the way Chad runs the show in Pine Lake, everything seems to run smooth. You know, there's no issues. You know, it's a Saturday show that's got a little bit more attitude. And then the Sunday show, it's usually still a really good show.
Oh yeah.
But you don't have the attitude with the stock sleds as you do with the opens. And you know, that's where, you know, that's the premier race. But I don't know. I think watching the open class stuff on Saturday is probably more fun.
Oh yeah. For the everyday person, the louder sleds out there is probably more intriguing.
Yeah.
They don't know what's quite going on, but it's like, holy cow, those things are going fast and they sound fast.
Right? Yeah.
I totally get what you mean though. Like it's nice to have that spot to race the mod sleds and to have competition with mod sleds and the faster sleds and the more tinkering that you can do. And it's just, it's more of a, I don't know, crazy race. I don't know, where you can push the limits more.
Right. And you know, when it's just stock stuff, there's less interest from, or I guess intrigue by some of the lower class, like the sport guys and the semi-pro guys. You know, there's that level of, you know, get to graduate up into and maybe race open class one day.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's good. I think it's healthy to have that the diversity there. But I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah. No, it'll be an interesting winter for sure. Artie Cat coming back and everything, and
For sure, yeah. I think it's great. I hope I haven't heard too much from a race side of it, like with Articap, but I assume they'll be back racing. They'll, I mean, we need them to be out there competing. There, as long as I've been racing, they're the ones that we've always benchmarked ourselves off of, and probably vice versa. So, yeah, we'll see. You guys haven't heard anything, have you? What the long game is for racing with them?
No.
With Cat?
no, not long term. No,
So we'll see.
but I don't know. Kyle, you got anything else?
I don't know. If there wasn't a year rule, what sled would you be racing? Like,
Good question.
that's a good one.
A year rule?
Like it's 5-year production rule.
7 year.
7 year.
Yep.
Yeah. So your sled is out this year. Right?
Yep. My 2019. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So if I had to pick
Any sled to show up to
sled
Pine Lake
with. Well, right now it's pretty hard to beat what we've got.
Yeah. Except for the 2025.
Let's say you have to get a sled 05 and older.
Yeah.
Okay. My 2014 IQ. The last year that we raced the IQs in cross country before we went to the production rule, where then we jumped into that was the rush style again, but in 15. So that specific year, it wasn't much different than 13. It was the high port snowcross engine and this chassis, 128 rear suspension. But we learned a whole bunch in 2013 the hard way. Lost a ton of cranks. I think in Park Rapids we had 5 crankshafts out of 8 sleds, replacing them
At one time? Or
well, I mean in different stages. I think we had 3 down at once.
holy crap.
But we basically, we didn't get the memo. We had a new port or whatever, new cylinder port in 13 versus 2012, but we didn't change our target RPM. So we were supposed to be about 150 to 200 RPM higher with this higher port engine, and we just raced all year and just didn't know what was going on. Basically, we were detonating to the point because we were loading it right probably on top of the torque. We were detonating enough, but we had good enough fuel because we were mixing our fuel 50-50 with 110 and pump gas. And we weren't getting piston detonation, but we were detonating, and it was knocking out the lower rod bearings. So it wasn't until the end of the year in 2013 that we actually got that insight. We spent a week with Rick Bates from Roseau here, and then Tom and Ben. They came into Fargo, and Aaron Christensen was down. Myself, Taylor was there helping, I'm sure. But yeah, we went through that whole exercise, and we did a bunch of clutching at the end of the 2013 year, and then going into 2014, we had that starting point. So that was the most consistent IQ sled that I had, and that was that was the biggest year that I ever had. From a overall like year of doing stuff. Like I did the Iron Dog that year, won the Soo that year. My goal going into that year was to win the Soo, the I-500, and the Iron Dog. I had that in the back of my mind. I said, this is doable. Never been up to Alaska before to race it, but I figured, you know what? You got to go in there with positivity, thinking that you're going to win.
Yep.
And was racing it with Scotty Feo, so did a bunch of testing, went to Alaska for a week leading up to the race, or in January, and then again in February leading up to the race right after the I-500. But back home here, the 600R, the IQ, it was just a rocket ship. It was it was durable. We figured out where we needed to run it RPM wise. We had this clutching arsenal at the time of different style weights and stuff that worked awesome. On the ice, we were getting hole shots. They were pulling out of the corner like tractors. They were fun. And I think I did get a win in Pine Lake that year in the open class.
Yep.
Led the stock class for a while, and then Zach, I think, maybe won.
Yep.
So ended up, but he had a good sled as well. And then in the I-500, I remember, I think I had a chance to win. We had left in flights, left with Brian Dick. And that was the year that they intermixed all the sport guys with all the pros and stuff. And they had, if you wanted to pay the extra, to be in the pro class, you could. So I think we started the 5th flight or something. So 10th, 11th out. And half the field in front of us were, sport class guys and, guys that after the fact shouldn't have probably been there.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were bombing down the ditch side by side. I would lead, then Brian would lead, and I remember he was leading before we got to the first section of river. So it was before we got to the first fuel stop down in Plummer, and he was in front of me, but I could wheel up on him at will in the ditch in the snow. So I'm like, this is gonna be a good weekend.
This is fun.
So, but I let him lead. I was like, well, Brian knows his way around. He's a good rider. He's won the I-500 before, so I'm just gonna follow him around. And we were on that first section of river. It was, I don't remember what river that is. It's not the big one on the north side of the highway there, but we were on the south side, kind of going over to Plummer, and we were coming up on it was a slower sport semi-pro guy, and I was right on Brian's tail, and he was letting Brian around, and I don't think he realized I was there. And as we were going around the corner, and we were going at speed, 70 miles an hour, I'm kind of around a small little dog leg sweeper type corner on the river, and as he went by, the other guy checked up right inside, pulled in right behind him. And I was literally from me to you away from Brian's bumper at the time. It basically drove right over my skis as I'm going. And, that pretty much ended it. I derailed, crashed hard, derailed my track. So I sat there until everybody came through, waved them because it was, kind of a blind corner as you're sitting down in the river in the snow dust. And I was, just trying to make sure that I wasn't going to get hit. So nobody was going to run into my snowmobile, stuff like that. And then I had enough tools where I could take the skid out and then get the track back on and get the skid back in. And then I, limped my way up into Plumber. Nothing was damaged, horrible. I mean, I can't remember if I bent a control arm or not, but I decided not to keep going anyway. Went into Plumber, said, yeah, I'm out, head back to the trailer. I was pretty hot. And then anyway, packed up, went to Alaska, and then came back from Alaska, and the next weekend after Alaska was wore out when I blew my shoulder out. But by far that was the long version of what sled that I'd like to.
In the middle there.
We got back to it.
In the middle there, I had the thought, like, how the hell did we get here?
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, so that's 2014.
Yeah, yep. You brought it back, though, perfectly. That's awesome.
The gals warned you.
Yeah.
That's awesome, though. That's what podcasts are for, just to let people ramble and tell their stories.
I'm good at that.
That's awesome.
Mine's 2000 Gen 2, I think. 600.
Yeah.
That's a good one. But
They are good sleds.
yeah, but the only way to do it is with that 1-inch track.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Those older sleds, yeah.
Yeah.
I never raced a Gen 2.
Oh,
Really?
really?
That's
Even
surprising. I'll be damned.
what were you in
When
against?
Edge check.
That was
was.
other than in mod at the Soo we
Yeah.
were on
Oh,
Gen
2, that would have
Okay.
been a Gen 2. Yeah.
Yeah, but as far as like a stock sled, for cross country racing, I went from a wedge to the edge in '99, and then the edge 2000, 2001, 2002. We were starting to dabble in the Pro Axes, which was still the edge chassis. Right up until the Fusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the way Troy DeWald and then the short sled at the zoo in the old mod class,
Yep.
they're wicked fast. But that's what I didn't. Around them years when they started switching from like the triples to the Liberty engine, like I don't know why they didn't just go with the Liberty engine right away. Or was there more developing or something going on?
You mean the 600? That was
Like
our
wait,
Fuji engines.
Yeah.
Still right.
yeah,
And then, when we transitioned into the twins, because the twins came out in the mid-90s.
yeah.
So my guess is, it was a numbers game. I didn't really get into the weeds when it came to, like, what engine package we were running. I was, like, just wanted to drive snowmobile.
Yeah, yeah.
So the triples must have built more power.
Mm-hmm.
And I do know that the triples, like at the Soo, though, I mean, they're a little heavier, but they spin out. They they run good. They're smooth, like the triple firing order, all that stuff.
Yep.
It's a good, durable, long running engine. I remember us talking about too, like the triple's going to be better, at the end of the day when it gets heavy pulling and stuff like that. But probably because it had more power.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same conversation now when we're talking about twin pipe versus single pipe. Guys are, like, oh, the twin pipe, that's what you got to have at the end of the day. We haven't veered away from it either. So the twin pipe is still a package that we know can win at the Soo, but I'm pretty sure we'll see a single pipe win one day.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Whether or not there's a rule change, it doesn't sound like or feel like the Soo will ever veer away from a twin pipe, opportunity to run.
Yeah.
Just because it's it's a standalone event, kind of like Pine Lake when it comes to, being able to do what they need to do, and I think the crowd and the spectators like, the noise from the twin pipes,
Oh, yeah.
but the single pipes are plenty loud.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Me and Kyle are having so much fun building these old sleds, these old 440s, these old triples last year. Are we ever going to see an old Bunke sled out there to come run with us?
There's been talk. The boys have brought it up. I just think back to, you say you'd love to, get a Gen 2. So I totally get where you're at.
Yeah.
But I have no desire to go back.
You're still using carburetors. It's the same thing.
So
basically the same sled.
I'm not an engine guy. I put in what works.
Yeah.
I'm a chassis guy. Like I love working on and tuning on chassis. And as we've progressed into the, the new chassis throughout, over the last 25 years, 30 years down here since I started now. But it's been, that's the one thing that I've really kept up on with evolving is, suspensions and ergos and, that piece of it. So sitting on those old things, it brings back memories. Don't get me wrong. But I remember how I used to feel after I drove one of those things as hard as I needed to drive it in order to compete. And like, I can get off one of these, at least I could, back when I was running all the time, and do it again tomorrow. Where when we won an 02, I'm pretty sure Thor pretty much had to, we had to get drive-through on the way home from the Soo that year because I wasn't getting out of the car. And I was only, 25.
So we're probably never going to see a trailing arm again.
I wouldn't say no. Definitely, if the boys wanted to try something like that, we'd entertain it. One of the problems is everything we got on our plate right now.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing that Alex Atin has told us too. He doesn't care to go back to the older stuff. He's focused on the new stuff.
Right. Yeah. Not all of us have the same level of ambition as Ryan Nelson. He just called me the other day and he said, I just picked up another 94. Why? They were fast.
Yeah. Oh, funny.
Well, I guess I have a question. What excites you about going forward, like into the future? You got any big plans coming up or what?
Outside of, what the norm is, nothing right off the top of my head as far as like something that we're really truly looking forward to. I know, the boys, I'm looking forward to just continuing, to work with the boys. Like I see, I hope we can continue to do this for a long time. Taylor and Harley are busy in life. Bo is getting busier in life as he gets older. I made some life choices when I was their age that, led us to, I guess, be where we're at. And they're, I guess, not 100% following the same path I did, which that's good because it doesn't pay the bills that well. So we'll hopefully be able to, keep winning, keep driving. The one thing I would like to see us do, though, or would like to see, is I'd like to see Aaron get one or two more wins at the Soo.
Mm-hmm.
One would put him in line with...
That'd be 8, wouldn't it?
That would be 8.
Yep.
And 2 would put him over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be pretty cool. And to be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty cool
so you
goal to have.
You have the one, this past one, kind of as a team owner.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, but I wasn't technically on the sled,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I'm washing my hands of it a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, we, on the first one, I was a backup driver. You
Yeah.
know, so, and Corey's win with us in 05 was as a backup driver.
Yeah.
So
there's a couple of skewed different ways of looking at it too.
Totally. So yeah, I guess you can consider the last one in 24 here as another feather, but another feather in the hat. But I'm looking at it from being on the seat standpoint.
Yeah. Oh heck yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hell yeah.
But, well, I don't know. We how long have we been going, Brody?
218.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to split this up. Nobody's gonna want to sit here that
No,
long.
Oh no, people do.
Really?
Yep.
It shocks me every time, but
full 3 hours with Chad Deerdahl and Herfindahl and Wes Selby, and the longer the better. The people love it.
Yeah, Crazy. Oh,
So, because how many times do like a fan of yours, Gabe, like how often does somebody get to just sit down at the bar with you and just bullshit with you for 2 hours? So like people get to listen to that and kind of like they're part of the conversation almost.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Glad you guys are doing this. This is awesome. And that's why I got the TV in here. I don't sit here and watch movies. Usually it's a podcast or we got music on or something. But as I'm sitting back here, doing shocks and stuff, Taylor's been good at getting the podcast going. I've been more just throw music on, so that I'm not too ingrained in what's going on. I can stay focused on what I'm working on.
Yep.
But yeah, he'll throw you guys on periodically when we're working on the Soo sled and listen to. I think I listened or sat here and when you guys did Josh's and when we had that one pulled up. So it was fun to listen to him. God, I kind of miss running with him or being around him. He was a good guy. Bubba sent me a picture the other day, and it was of a Fox shock on a. I think it was either a truck cab or a. Or is it seat or is it?
No, it's
cab.
Josh rigged up Walker Evans shocks on the cab of a semi.
Yeah, that's what it was. Bubba said, "Yep, they even work on semis."
Yep. Yeah, he had sent those to me too. He's like, "Yeah, it's a lot better ride now in the cab."
And yeah, that's the type of guy Josh is. He's smart as hell and just cool. Just doing cool shit.
Yeah, he's a good one. For sure.
But no, we really appreciate you letting us come up here and do this with you, Gabe. And I think it'll be a very popular episode in our industry of snowmobile racing. So
So who's next?
I think we're trying to get Rewadina on for the next one, and then I think trying for number 77, Brady Deerdahl.
Okay,
that's his old racing number, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Perfect. Yeah. Well.
So
good work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep it rolling.
So all right. Thanks again, Woody's and VS3.
Mm-hmm. So and thank you. And this place was awesome. So I had a lot of fun. Good conversation.
Thanks to our live audience sitting here the whole time.
Freaking awesome.
All right, we'll see you in the next one.
See ya.
Thanks.